welcome to the Kansas City Artists Coalition Artist Talk series. I am your host, Programs Director Jen Harris, and I'm so happy that you're joining us today for this conversation with Philo Northrup. In August of 2023, Philo's exhibition, Report to Homeroom, will be a conversation surrounding gun violence, specifically gun violence within the classroom and how it has impacted us on a social and cultural level. We recorded this interview on June 2nd, 2023, which is National Gun Violence Awareness Day. And the hashtag on social media is hashtag Wear Orange. You are more than welcome to look up the Wear Orange campaign and gather more information for yourself on this subject. Regarding Philo as an artist, his artist statement says, "As a child, I would steal away to the basement to escape the sound and fury of my bickering parents. Using the junk downstairs, my parents grew up in the Depression and threw nothing away. I'd create assemblages, crime scene dioramas, theater sets, strange new creatures, and trophies for dubious achievements. What I make now are descendants of those early trauma souvenirs. Later, I learned the history of this found object art form sprung from Dada and continued with artists such as George Herms, Noah Purfoy, Betty Saar, David Best, and Edward and Nancy Kienholz's fascination with all the little tragedies in junk. Today, we are overwhelmed by an endless fire hose stream of uninvited content and discarded objects. All this refuse is choking our earth. Give it to me. I won't waste it. I'll expose its artificial beauty to the light." Philo has a very long and illustrious and incredible CV. He has shown art all over the world. You can see his art cars in Kansas City, among many other places. And I highly encourage you to check out his work in greater detail after this interview. There is an implied trigger warning for this conversation, and there is no particular political or social agenda that we are pushing. We are here to have a conversation about the facts of gun violence and its impact specifically within the classrooms of the public education system in America. I appreciate you taking the time to watch this video and wish you the best. Please feel free to come out and positively and encouragingly support this exhibition in August of 2023 at the Kansas City Artists Coalition. All right, welcome to the Kansas City Artists Coalition Artist Talk series. We are here with exhibiting artist Philo Northrup, who in August of 2023 will be displaying his Report to Homeroom exhibition. So welcome to the conversation, Philo.
Thank you, Jen.
Yeah, you've got a long history of making, I think, really incredible, visceral, tangible art. And I don't think that this exhibition is going to be anything less than everything you're known for, which I think sometimes is a bit shocking. So I would love to know, first of all, we're here recording this on National Gun Violence Day, which is why we're both wearing orange. The hashtag is Wear Orange throughout social media. I believe it's wearorange.org, or is it .com? We'll double
Probably
check.
.org, but you'll find it anyway. They are good that way.
There it is. So in the history of your work as a creative, as an artist, have you always leaned into social statements, and why did you pick this one?
Actually, no, I don't go into the studio with a preconceived plan on anything usually. I just kind of riff off the junk that I have there. I make my sculptures made out of found objects, so it's stuff that I find on the street or other people throw away or in thrift stores and things like that. And I just combine things that in a way that makes sense to me, and then over time I'm able to sort of see what it might be about. So you're just sort of channeling, that's the fun part of it too. You're just sort of channeling your subconscious, and you make these little dreamscapes, and you move on. And like some of them are, and after a while they coalesce into series sometimes. So normally, my work has a lot of color, a lot of vibrant color, and it's, subversive but optimistic, and these works started to appear in the studio that were not that. They were, white, black, brown, and they were full of like this vibe. It's like fear, really, and they were grim. I'm like, this is sort of this cul-de-sac of work I don't know what to do with. And after 3 or 4 of those came out, I realized what I was doing. I was just channeling the world around me in the steady drum beat, excuse me, of the tragedy of gun violence, especially in schools. The school shooting thing, and so that's what was going on there. 1 second. Anyway, so I had this series of work, and this work has a lot. It's constructed out of a lot of shot up metal, things like car parts, appliances, mailboxes. This kind of debris is ubiquitous in rural America, and I formed assemblages out of that. And some of them, they're red lights blinking in it. So the whole show is, grim. It's a sobering show on a sobering subject, and the drills that students have now. What are they called? Active shooter drills are common in every school now, and so it's an unusual thing for it to focus on a political statement like this. But it's just gotten to the stage where it's just unavoidable that we have to do something, unavoidable that you have to speak up. And so, as an artist, I created this exhibition. The Kansas City Artists Coalition is brave enough to show it. And I also want to give a shout out to Mothers in Charge Kansas City, who help people deal with families specifically deal with being the victim of gun violence, and this show is dedicated to those families, and any proceeds from the show will go to that group, Kansas City Mothers in Charge.
It is such a sobering and terrifying reality that we're facing in this country at this point. I have a 12-year-old stepson, and he came home and told us about the drills that he's doing in his 5th grade classroom. And
fifth grade.
They're babies,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, their biggest challenge of the day is what of the many activities are they going to do at recess, but they've been given these tools, such as very thick textbooks, to hold up as a shield. That's what they've been told.
Really?
Yeah, these are the things that they're told, presumably will save their life, when we haven't even really explained death to them, because why would we? It's not been presented. It's not necessary, and I mean, knowing that I lost my grandparents early in my life, like it's a privilege to not have had to explain that to him yet, but it's truly terrifying. And this is a subject that affects all of us, because even if you don't have kids in the school system, you know people with kids, you love people with kids, you can, as a human being, I think, just generally respect that this is not we don't want to pass this kind of generational trauma along, and yet we are. It's truly horrifying to me that we've let this legislative assault rifle ban lapse, and then seen this 1,000% increase in mass murder. I think it's very interesting, specifically, that you utilize materials from rural America, because I so recently read a statistic about there being more gun violence in rural America than in the inner city, though knowing that we live in cities, or the same big city, small town, there's a lot of gun violence. And just knowing the value of guns in rural America, I grew up shooting cans. I grew up shooting mailboxes and signs. These were things that it never occurred to anybody that it was a deadly weapon. It was just it was a tool. It's a thing that's in the household. So I think it's interesting that you've leaned into the rural aspect of these particular resources, but you're utilizing, I guess you're joining forces with the neighborhood support systems in the city to offer comfort and peace and advocacy. Have you connected with rural programming at all, or have you found any? Have you found anybody who on a rural basis is talking about gun violence the way we're talking about it in the cities?
No, but I haven't really begun that kind of outreach yet.
Mm.
I just looked for the groups that I could find, and I thought locally was a good place to start.
Certainly.
And I've done a fair amount of shooting appliance parts in the desert and things like that. And this show isn't about that. It's just that if you go to the deserts and the forests, you'll find this sort of debris everywhere.
Mhm.
And so I've taken it and I've held it up to the light. And when you do that, quite literally, they're lit from the inside. When you do that, you see what kind of destructive power it has.
Mhm.
And it's something we need to address, is that guns are kind of sexy and there's a beauty to them, and there's a beauty to the shot up things. I've used this in artwork before that's not on this subject.
Mhm.
It has a formal quality to it, done by something you can't do by hand. But just like a car is dangerous, or alcohol can be dangerous, we need to regulate these very dangerous things like we do cars and alcohol and tobacco, or adopting a pet even.
Mhm.
It's we just need some, and it's something that the majority of Americans agree to. It's something that the majority of the NRA members agree to. It's like, keep
Mhm.
guns out of people with red flags, which means maybe they have a history of stalking, of domestic abuse, of violence, and things like that, or mental instability. And teenagers. Teenagers are not there yet. They shouldn't be having automatic weapons, and they shouldn't be able to just walk around with a gun. It's legal in Missouri right now for a teenager. I mean, technically a toddler, to walk around with an AR-15, and
Mm.
that doesn't sound like a good idea. I don't think anybody would agree with that. So, there's a wall of money between these kind of common sense things, and just enforcing the laws that we have, and updating the universal background check, the FBI, NICS system. It just needs to be updated. Before 9/11, states really didn't share driver motor vehicle violation records. And then after 9/11, they did. And I know that because I was renewing my license in California at the time. And they said, well, we can't issue your license because you have an unpaid ticket in Maryland from 1982. Just like, what? So it can be done, and it should be done. And I can't think of what more, news stories, what other events could possibly need to happen than the tragedies we've already seen. These schools, Uvalde, etc., Bob School, Ralph Yarl in our own town, even though he wasn't at school. I mean, these are kids. These are just kids. And
Well, they're being violated by adults. There's no consent in this. There's no participation. These are, they're not. I don't have every statistic sitting in front of me, but even in the instance of Uvalde, it is a former student who was an adult who went into that space
well,
to
he was
cause.
18. He was
Yeah,
18.
and that's it, right? It seems like a far stretch, but I was watching Goodfellas last night, and in the beginning of the movie, Ray Liotta's character, he's like maybe 14. He's dumping gasoline all over all of these vehicles, and he lights a match. He's doing what he's told. But that so specifically rings the bell with me to a documentary I watched recently where they had footage of all of these 18, 19-year-olds fighting in Afghanistan and Iraq, U.S. troops who had been enlisted right out of high school. And they were showing these kids all hyped up to be part of the war machine. And those who survived were having post-traumatic stress documentary conversations with this videographer, and the regret, the lifetime of trauma that they carry around. You wouldn't know that on the faces of these kids. You wouldn't know that on the face of a 14-year-old, because the adrenaline, the excitement, the participation, the belonging, the community. You can sell a bullshit philosophy like patriotism to an 18-year-old so much easier than you can sell it to a 40-year-old and say, this is worth dying for. And I think there's a really interesting dynamic occurring in our country where we're trying to hold both and make them equivalent, instead of saying, you can maintain your Second Amendment right to own a weapon, but you can also be responsible with that privilege. We keep trying to mash these two things together, right? And it's not in any way seeming to work for our country. But I don't know what the end in sight is. I think having these conversations on an artistic level is incredibly important, but I can't seem to figure out, is it because it's not happening in the schools of our legislators that they're not doing anything about it?
A good question. I don't think it's a question of patriotism. I don't think the extremists on the right wing have a monopoly on the American flag or on Jesus or anything else, any
Right.
kind of righteous claim. I think the patriotic thing to do is protect our kids.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the patriotic thing to do is to see that we're a nation of laws, not a nation of men, and that we conform to the standards of our Constitution. And the Constitution gives all sorts of rights and gives the government all sorts of ways to regulate those rights, so that people aren't, crying fire in the middle of a crowded theater,
Right.
and that whole concept. And there's definitely a crisis. It's a public health crisis. It's a corrupt, money for influence crisis with the gun lobby and the NRA. Just raking in hand over fist all these gun sales. Now, I think it's important to note that there are already I don't know, what is it, 400 plus million guns out there. There are already a lot of dangerous weapons out there. So we need to, first of all, regulate what we can do with that, with some common sense stuff that, like I said, majority, it's everybody agrees with. It's not controversial if you really get down, if you can lower the volume, talk about just about anybody. And it's just common sense stuff. And I'm not sure what the best thing to do, but I know that there are organizations working hard on it. One is Everytown, and it's associated with Moms Demand Action, and they all have, it's a national organization that's working for political change wherever they can. And they go into state legislatures and do things about who gets to have a gun, and how many bullets, and what kind of gun, and what kind of training, and how do you store it, and all these kinds of things. I set up on the Instagram site for this, it's report_to_homeroom. There's a link tree. A link tree is just a website with links, and there are links to these sites and the stats that they provide, and they're updated all the time. It also, like the Rand Corporation, Pew Corporation, things like research groups like that, and a bunch of newspaper articles about some of these tragedies, and some great opinion pieces that break down what we're talking about. What can we do? Well, here's some things that we can get past. Here's some things that are working. And you look at you're talking about rural versus urban America. That's one thing, and we can talk about that. But if you look at the states with very loose, permissive gun laws, where you can walk around, like Missouri, the gun death rate is way up. That includes a lot of suicides too. It's really very tragic. And in states like California, where they're more restrictive laws, but still not what any European or Australian would call restrictive. It's like 40% lower. So all the facts are there. there's this, the gun, the gun industry keeps trying to prevent research,
Mhm.
and they have some politicians they bought that are empowering that. It's just crazy.
Well, I think that's why that's where the overlap of misnomer, I think, is presented, right? Because this isn't a question of revoking anybody's Second Amendment rights. I drove past a sign the other day that was like, support the NRA, don't let them take your gun. And it was like, who's still telling people this lie?
Oh, well, there's a
Nobody on this side of the
propaganda
fence wants
works.
to take it. Right, right. Well, and I think that's the thing that I really want to illustrate in this conversation and in what your artwork is about, is you're advocating for safety. You're advocating for agreeable expectation among all people that if we have the privilege and the right to do something, we do so with the understanding of the responsibility that we have, and that it's not muddied by the waters of political agenda or location or rural versus urban. Just that everybody has the same expectation, and if you violate those rules, there are consequences to those actions, right? Uh, I cannot drive my car into a building and walk away. Oops. I cannot be pulled over with expired tags or an expired driver's license or a ticket in Maryland when I'm in California without there
Mhm,
being consequences, right?
mhm.
Um, and I want to make it clear that that you're not advocating for the propaganda machines BS on what they say people who want common sense gun laws want. You're saying that this is about saving lives and this is about bettering our own environment. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think what I've done here is I am interpreting the world around me, which is full of very tragic events on this subject matter. Kids being killed by guns, um, specifically in schools, which because I think that just hits me. It just strikes fear in me. And that's the thing about when I talk about this show or when I work on this show, it's a little bit traumatic. Not that I've had to suffer anything like what the KC mothers in charge people have and the families they serve. There's no parity there. But I know what a scared kid is. I know that, and that's it's troubling for me. So what I've done is I've made these pieces because that's what I do, and I've been doing it for decades, and that and then I present it and see how it resonates, and this is resonating quite a lot. Surprising to me, people get what this show is about immediately just by seeing one piece, um, and it's on everybody's mind, and that gives me hope that maybe something more realistic can be done. I think there's a lot of good people moving towards there. And I've laid out the facts and all this information on the Linktree site, and you can look for yourself. This is all based on qualitative research that you can check out for yourself. And
Right. These are facts. They're not opinions.
right, and there's multiple sources for all these things,
Hmm.
and there's even one of the links. I think it's the Rand Corporation. It's a tool. You can go and put in variables like what state you want to look at. What if you change the laws one way or the other? What would happen to the death stats according to the history of the past so many years? And it's a model. And so again, if in a rational world where we could discuss this without people cranking up the volume and screaming some sort of nonsense about red herrings, um, then it would be quite possible to come to a consensus on many of the things that I think, as we talked about, are just a start. It's like, we don't have 4-year-olds drive cars. We don't give them liquor, right? We don't just give kids cigarettes, when they ask for it. Just
Right. We've
protecting kids.
mandated all of their safety. They're not allowed
You
to
know,
work before a certain
it's
age. These are
I
realities.
don't. Yeah, it's our responsibility as adults to protect the children. That's really what is I think the distilled line of this show. That why we can do better to protect these kids, because these are real people. I mean, they're there's a couple pieces devoted to Uvalde where 19 kids were killed and 2 teachers, and just crazy. And there's a memorial there, and there'll be photos of these kids. And when you see photos like that, or see photos of Ralph Yarl or that girl that got shot down in somebody's driveway that same weekend in New York, it just breaks your heart. And it's hard not to think of this stuff in the presence of these sculptures. And so it's kind of a bummer. So you should tell everyone to come and see it.
Absolutely. What a good tagline. It's kind of a bummer, but we'd love for you to come and see it. It is such an incredibly important conversation, and it has the potential to spark controversy in that everybody has an opinion on something. So I'm grateful that you are focused on the facts of this. I'm grateful that you are doing it from a place of the presentation of responsibility. We are the adults who have a responsibility to protect these children. And I don't know anybody who would disagree with that. I don't know a single person, no matter what side of this great debate they've landed on. So I want to thank you for your time. I want to thank you for your energy. I know that this is controversial in a different way. And it's incredibly important that this work is done. And I'm grateful that you're doing it. So thank you for that.
Well, thank you, Janet, and thank you to the Kansas City Artists Coalition for this venue. And on that link tree, by the way, is the statement on gun violence from KCAC, which I think was very, very well put together, and a very articulate statement, and it encourages artists to engage on this and other subjects, because it's important to have dialogue. You have something traumatic like this. Back years ago in my work life, I did a lot with computers and making educational software and things like that. And one of the things we did was a website about the Holocaust for middle schoolers who are just learning about World War II, 11 and 12-year-olds. And if you want to introduce a subject like this, or the subject of kids getting massacred in school, you have to do it in a way that doesn't shut people down right away. Just like, boom, I don't want, put them in shock, right?
Yeah.
And, there are things to do, like some of the most effective, I think, images from that awful thing in World War II, those camps. It's like the piles of shoes or the piles of eyeglasses or something. Humans. These are humans. We don't know them. It doesn't matter. They're kids. They should have a right to go to school safely. That's just, what's controversial about that? And the whole idea of anyone saying, well, give the kids something to hide behind, or we should give teachers guns. Great, if the teacher is a former Navy SEAL or something, great. But otherwise, if they don't have that kind of training, even soldiers, as you alluded to, and policemen will tell you, when there's a panic-stricken crowd of screaming people and people with guns, and you don't know what's going on, what are the odds that you'll be able to use that weapon you were issued effectively without any specific training for this? And even if you do have some kind of training, this is like the real deal. The panic's on. Most people will freeze. A lot of, like I said, soldiers and cops freeze because it's a human thing to do.
That's
and
it.
these are teachers. These are not commandos. We can do better with sensible things, like I say, that there's already a consensus on. We just need to pierce that money.
Listen, my father was a military police, and then he was a cop my whole life. And these, and I grew up very rurally. So, being a queer in the big city, this is, I have two lives spliced together in so many ways. And that's it. The conversation I've had with the MPs and with former military and veterans, with police now, there is a human element to reacting to any crisis that does not make you superhuman. And there is the true potential for tragedy to occur even when you're trying to be the good guy, because you are a human being who is caught up in a moment. And I recognize that this is not that experience, that instance is not what's occurring in our schools, but there is a truth to that I think it's completely okay to talk about, that we aren't all going to be able to react like machines in the face of tragedy or in the face of potential death. That's not your immediate reaction, no matter how much you would like for it to be.
Yeah.
And I just want to honor that, all of the people I know that want to keep their guns in their homes also want to keep their children safe. And
Yeah.
they will go to any extent and any length to do that. And if that means putting their gun in a locked cabinet or a locked drawer, or utilizing a safety cord that prevents that trigger from being pulled, it is not a complicated experience to keep it in a place that prevents other people from being harmed. And, what's a couple of Saturdays to know how to use your weapon? I mean, how many weeks of driver's ed did I take to be allowed to operate a vehicle? How many tests over my lifetime do I have to take to make sure I understand the signage around me? Or we could do more in that arena too, but we have at least a base minimum of expectation that you understand the responsibility that you are requesting access to. And I just think it is so important to illustrate that most of us are on the same side. I want people to come and see your work and recognize that this is not a fight to be had. This is not something that you are rubbing in people's faces. This is not a political agenda. This is an expectation, human to human, heart to heart, that we do what's right by each other.
Yeah. And, I have friends that are KC cops, and I have relatives and friends that are soldiers or have been soldiers. The last thing they want is anyone not completely and thoroughly trained on a weapon to have one. And the second one is that these folks know what a gun can do. They've seen it. They have respect for that. And they have restraint and discipline around it. And, I had no problem with people like that, owning guns, people who have the discipline and restraint. And, that's fine. But we have a public health issue related to this gun violence. And the stats are all there. And hopefully, maybe this will contribute in some small way to some of that dialogue.
I hope so. I expect so. Thank you for having this conversation with me. I know it's sticky, it's difficult. It's, you want to be honest and open and reach as many people as you can. And I think that's exactly what you're going to do with this. So thank you for taking the time, Philo.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.